Today is Thursday, May 12, 2016. Our setting is in the family parlor of the Henry DeLand House Museum in DeLand, Florida, a project of the West Volusia Historical Society. My name is Hilda McCarter, a volunteer with the Historical Society and a resident of West Volusia since 1995. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Donald Corbin Johnston, a native of DeLand, whose roots in DeLand go back to the late 1870s. His grandfathers, Basil Bennett and S.W. Johnston, both arrived here in those early days. Don was employed for over 40 years at the E.O. Painter Printing Company. He was the third generation in the business, succeeding his father, Paul. Don retired as president in 1988. Let's hear from Don about his early days in DeLand, his memories of the once small city, and the things which shaped his life. Good morning, Don.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you here to share your memories of DeLand's growth and your own from early days to the present. Please begin with your birth, when and where it occurred, and a bit about your parents.
My life in DeLand began at the old Stone Street Hospital here in DeLand, which is still there today and is now a museum, but this was in February 1926. I am now 90 years old and have spent my whole life here, except 2 years when I was in the Army Air Corp during World War II. But there are many things that I can bring forth, maybe a little bit different than some of the other people, because I went to Dempsey Brewster Grammar School, I went to DeLand Junior High School, and then I DeLand Senior High School, and graduated there in 1944. And I want to make one comment about that. People ask me probably what is probably the greatest part of your life growing up. It's real easy to remember. It was going to high school and seeing all those people, all those friends that I had then, which our class was very small. We had there were about 13 boys. Most of them had joined and gone into the Navy or the Marines before. And my life with that started there, and I always lived on 206 West Stetson Avenue. That was my mother and daddy's home. Paul Johnston and Constance Johnston. And I lived there for 23 years until I got married. But my mother was a Corbin, and my middle name is Corbin. And my grandfather on my mother's side was George W. Corbin. He was from the Corbin Cabinet Lock Company in New Britain and was president of it at one time. That's about me. My first name, I don't know where Donald came from. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference, but the Corbin name, I've always carried it. I have a collection of some of the Corbin items that they made there in New Britain now that through the association with my mother, and she had 3 sisters, and they all lived in New Britain, so they all came down and visited once in a while, but most of my life here was not with them. It was growing up here and seeing what happened in downtown DeLand.
So when you came back from the service now, how did things change then?
Well, after I came back from the service, I went to Stetson for about a year. I took business course, but I was going to be in the printing profession. Well, they weren't offering anything there that could help me, tell me how to run a printing press or how to do this or how to set type or anything there. It was just a business. So I stopped after that and went one semester up at the University of Florida. Took a few more courses similar to that, but that was not really, I wasn't getting anything out of that either. So it was a whole lot better for me just to continue on. And I came back home and started working at the printing company. And just I had to learn everything from start to scratch, and which I knew a lot of it because I'd worked there at high school after high school. After school, I'd come down and Daddy said, I need you to help in the bindery or do this and that, which I was happy to do it. I'd rather be messing around with the girls at high school, but I was not able to do that. He wanted me to come down and help, which was fine. And I did that for a while, and then went around with all my friends after the war. There was lots of servicemen. Everybody, there were 35-year-old fellows going to Stetson. And here I was still in my early 20s, which was very enjoyable, and I learned a lot. And Stetson is not like it used to be, but not many things in DeLand are like they used to be. But continuing me to grow up with my grandfather, I'll go back a little bit, S.W. Johnston, he would take me downtown. This is when maybe I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And they had 2 hardware stores downtown, and we would go in to get things, and similar to what Lowe's has and all that today. But before we went in, out on the walk, right at the doorway where you entered into the hardware store, were 3 slot machines. There was a nickel, dime, and a quarter slot machine, and he always had some change in his pocket, so. I played the slot machines then, and that was fun. And then that went away not too long ago because that was gambling, and things didn't go over too good with the people here, and so all the slot machines were confiscated, and they were all put down in the basement of the old courthouse. They were there for a long time because I had some friends that worked down later in the later years, 10, 20 years ago, and they were still there, and then they finally decided to throw them all out. Well, they were collector's items then. But the other thing that downtown, I went downtown later on as I was in high school, and coming to those things, and you looked at the stores that were down here then. They had 3 or 4 lady stores. I mean, the women shopped in them. There were 2 or 3 nice men's stores, which I shopped in, bought some of my clothes in. And then there were a couple of barber shops, and then very few restaurants, nothing like it is today. In other words, it was an old country town, that's what it was, and the grocery stores were downtown. You parked right in front of the grocery store, and you got out of the car and walked in, got your groceries, and came home, put them in a bag. I mean, you didn't need many bags then, because boy, money filled up bags in a hurry. But I enjoyed that, and I saw how DeLand has changed. I mean, I worked at the printing company for over 40 years.
And at the time you started, the plant was in DeLand.
The plant was in DeLand. The building was built back in the 1870s. A lot of it was built out of brick that was made. A lot of it was made in Lake Helen. The brick were made in Lake Helen, and it was all brick building. I mean, it was 24 inches thick, the outside walls, and all the wood in there and everything inside was all high-class, heavy-duty stuff. It wasn't finished wood like we get today, but it was fine. It served us till 1970.
And the reason you moved it then?
And then back in 68 and 69, we had flooding problems at our plant, and we had to move and make arrangements to move because when it rained over 3 or 4 inches, the water was up to my knees in the building. And so I had a discussion with Wayne Sanborn. He was the city manager then. He was not real pleased about some of the things that was going on. They didn't want to pay for the damages that the water was doing. They said, well, it's an act of God. Well, not necessarily so. God didn't put the pipes down there to turn the water down to us. He didn't have anything to do with it. The city did it. So we finally ended up suing them an inverse condemnation suit, and they were forced to buy our property, and then we moved up to DeLeon Springs on US 17, right in downtown DeLeon. It's not any bigger than it was then. I mean, this hasn't grown much since 1970, but that's where I spent the better part of my life there, but then the front part of it, I stayed down here. So it really is a lot of history in that I knew.
And the business is still going on.
Business is still going on. Two of my nephews are running the business. They are my brother's two boys, Jeff and Mark Johnston. They are there now, and the plant is going well, and everything is all modernized, quite a few different things. Most everything has gone to computers and that type of thing, and makes it much simpler than what I grew up with. Well, it's not easy what I grew up with, and they didn't see all of this. They saw a little bit of it. But my brother Dick and I, we saw it all. And that was very, very interesting to go through the change and the transition of all that things. But going back to DeLand and knowing anything about what went on downtown, I was fortunate enough that DeLand at one time had the St. Louis Cardinals were having their spring training here, which I'm sure most everybody knew about that. But my uncle, Austin Conrad, the field was named after he and his cousin, Conrad Field, which is still that same way. But I went down in the dugout one day, and sitting next to me was Dizzy Dean and Joe Medwick and the Pepper Martin, those fellows that played professional baseball. And those were the dirtiest talking men and everything. I mean, they wasn't a nice word came out of any of their mouths, but they were rough fellas. They all had spikes on their shoes, and sliding into second base, they would do anything they can to spike you. But that was the way they played it back then. And then, for some reason, I did not go back on the history of this, but the major league teams went away. But DeLand had the Red Hats, DeLand Red Hats, and they played professional ball here at the old Conrad Field. And the stadium was on the east side of the field, and I didn't see anything wrong with it, except you looked into the sun in the afternoon games sometimes. But the players, it didn't bother them that much. But now they moved it to the other end and built all new stuff. Everything is completely high class. But the sun's not in your eyes anymore because they're playing most of the games at night. So that was solved, but it cost a lot of money to solve it. They could have put it on the other end and been just as good. But I saw Spec Martin Stadium being built. I saw that. That was not there for a long time ago. I don't have the dates on when that was put in because the Stetson played all of their football games there at the corner of Pennsylvania and Woodland Boulevard, where Emily Hall is now. Right out in front of that was the football field. I mean, it was there, and I would go under the fence to get into the games. I only lived a block and a half from a game. So when that happened, why, we got in for, they didn't catch us usually, but that part was very nice, and that part. But then things changed at Stetson, and they moved the stadium down to Spec Martin Stadium, which is where it should be and not downtown anyway. But that part worked out well, and I spent also in this area all of the springs that we have, Blue Springs, DeLand Springs. I've been to Juniper, I've been to Silver Glen. I know all the local springs in the area. I've been up and down the St. Johns River. I've fished in the St. Johns River, and most of that part of my life was later years that I did a lot of the fishing and the boating and everything. But my boating mostly was over in salt water. I thought it was more fun over there, so that was my choice. A lot of my friends liked it over there. So, but the times that I have spent doing that was very well, and I am still a member of the St. Barnabas Episcopal Church. I was confirmed there in 1941, and it has changed considerably too. In other words, there are many things there that they have now are nothing like I grew up with. But it was fine, and Dr. Harry L. Taylor was the pastor there. He was the first pastor of St. Barnabas. There was the vicar before him, but he was the first pastor.
First rector.
Right. There at St. Barnabas, and he was Sidney Taylor's father, and he was very learned gentleman. He always wore a collar, and when you saw him coming down the street, he had a coat and a collar on because you knew he was a priest. And today, not necessarily that's going to happen. It's just they seem to think that they get in with the people better by them not knowing who they are. Well, I don't agree with that. And my situation also, when I went to church and always went, my mother made sure that I was dressed just like I am today.
And I think it should be mentioned that this is Thursday, and your favorite service is the Thursday noon.
That's right.
service.
Today,
That's why you're
after
dressed like
I
that.
finish here, I'm going to St. Barnabas to the 12 o'clock service, and I'm dressed correctly. But a lot of that casualness has come back. But there's a few things you have to remember, that some of the things that people do, just because you're casual, that doesn't make it. It doesn't give you maybe the respect of certain things that you need to do. And I was just brought up different. Now, my brother Dick was a little bit different than me. He didn't wear a coat as much as I did. But my mother made sure I was started right, and which is very nice. But lots of the people today disappoint me at the church, that they'll come in just like they came in from cutting the yard. Well, that's not going to church. And most everybody that in my age, they had to go to Sunday church meeting clothes hanging in their closet, and they always put it on, which made it very nice then. Today, that's not the same.
Well, Don, let's stop here and let you go back to your family, how you met Mary and your daughters, how life was when you were raising them here.
Yes, back in 1949, a friend of mine in Daytona called me up from Daytona, and she said, I have a friend that is here in Daytona. I'd like you to meet her. Would you like to come over and double date with my boyfriend? And the four of us go out together. And I said, well, sure I do. So I got prepared for doing all this, and the friend I went over with was Marshall Lane. He was in the insurance business here in DeLand for a long time in the Lane Agency. And we went over and got his girlfriend, and they took me down to Mary's house. And then when I went in there, and she answered the door, it was a very striking moment for me because this was 1949. And I walked in the front door, and here she was in a green dress, and she had heels on, and she was a very striking woman, and we were going to the drive-in movie. So, but she was plenty dressed for the drive-in movie, and that part. And then we got married that same year in November of 1949, November 26th, and stayed married for 66 years. I have 3 daughters. Conrad is the oldest one. Her name is Elizabeth Conrad, and she is named after the Conrads, which are prominent here in DeLand, and that part is where she got her middle name from. My second daughter is Donna Corbin, and she had the Corbin name from my mother's maiden name. And then the third daughter is Dorothy, or Dolly as we call her, and her middle name is Taylor, and Mary's mother's name was Taylor. So we have a lot of namesakes in our family. And they all grew up here in DeLand, born and raised here. I think they were born in the hospital that the Navy had out at the airport then. That was, they had pretty much gotten rid of the Stone Street Hospital and used the one the Navy had, as the Navy had left. And they all, two of them were born out there. The third one, Dolly, was born in the Fish Memorial Hospital, which was there on New York Avenue, where the new administration building is now. I don't know what you call that, the law center or the legal center, or it looks sort of like the Taj Mahal, but that's where Dolly was born. And then they finished high school here. They went all through the grade schools here. And they went to the new DeLand High School, which was back over off of Plymouth Avenue. I didn't ever go there. I graduated here at the old high school in 1944 on Clara Avenue, which was 3 stories, and it was a real nice building, and they had problems with that, so they built a new one. So that's another story. I would take some more than 30 minutes to talk about that, but. And then they have all moved away, my 3 daughters. One of them got married in 73, another one got married in 76, another one got married in 79. Well, the first daughter moved away and they went to Fort Myers. This was Donna, the middle daughter, and then they moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and she is still there today. And all of the 3 of these girls are over 60 years old. So, and then Dolly, the youngest daughter, she went to North Florida Junior College for a couple of years, and then she came back here and she worked at Belk Lindsay on the old location where Frontier is now. And then she met her husband there. And then they got married, and he finished up at Gainesville, and then they came back to Daytona, and he worked for Channel 2 television. And then they moved to the Tampa Bay area, where he went into cinematography. And he was really something else, and he is still there today. He's not doing his profession anymore because he made movies. He was a cameraman, the #1 cameraman for making many, many movies. He made over 30 different movies all over the world, some documentaries. Most of them were very learned people. He knows all of them. He can tell you whether some of them were real nice or they were a jerk or not. He can tell you the truth because he was working with them. But then my oldest daughter, Conrad, she spent some time and went to South Florida for a couple of years. And then she came back home and wasn't doing anything in the summer. And she started working up at Holiday House, which Bob Cook owned then. And she was a waitress there for a while. And then I said, well, Conrad, there's got to be something better than this. And so I threw a book that I had, magazine I had found. It was an airline book about stewardess or flight attendants, and I said, look into this. So, well, she looked into it, and she had a lot of interviews with 5 different airlines because you had to be a certain height, certain size. You couldn't be really big, but you had to be real personality advised going with it, and she fit the bill. And she went with National Airlines. She flew with them, based out of Miami for 10 years. And then Pan Am took them over, and she flew for a couple of years, and then she retired.
You had some good trips during that time, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I had lots and lots of wonderful trips because the family flew normally somewhere around $15 for us to fly. We would go to Las Vegas for $15. That's there and back. I mean, that's today you can't do that. Oh, we went to Houston quite a few times. We went up into Virginia a few times. Wherever National went, we went. And that was very enjoyable. And Conrad met her husband. He was a pilot for National for 17 years. And they moved to Texas finally and have 2 children there, and they all live in Texas. All the grandkids. I have 8 grandkids total between the 3 girls and 5 great grandkids. And they're living with their parents where their parents live in the same city. And that part really, they left here. When they left, they did not come back to DeLand. They come back and look around, and everything that they used to see is not the same. I mean, all the buildings they've built, what the city has done, and taken away a lot of historical things. Lots of things are gone. But the politicians decide what they wanted to do, and they seem to think that that was an asset for DeLand. Well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the main thing that DeLand still is it's still a county seat. And Sidney Taylor worked very hard to keep it here. We did not want it to get to Daytona. No one wanted it to go, because Daytona on the east side, it's always been friction. It's always been friction, and Daytona today has turned into something really that it would not fit the bill as a county seat. To me, it would not. But speaking of Daytona, I was very fortunate to see Sir Malcolm Campbell run down the beach in 1935 in the Bluebird. I was there. I wasn't but 9 or 10 years old. But my daddy took me over. He liked to see car things. Well, it was amazing. There wasn't many of us there because he started, and then when he left, he was going 230 miles an hour down the beach. So we didn't see where he ended up, and then he had to come back, and we saw it when it came back. But that car is on display over at the France family got it somewhere over in Daytona. But that's another thing that I cannot forget. But also, speaking of Daytona, I saw the first race on the Daytona International Speedway in 1959. That was very interesting too, but that to me is a very dangerous track, very dangerous. They're going way too fast, and they don't remember this is only a race. It doesn't make a difference how fast you go, but it seems like the powers to be seem to think that is. But that has nothing to do with DeLand, but a lot of us always went to the races over there for a long time, and then I got away from that. The smaller racetracks in the area, in New Smyrna and Barberville, we all went, the friends and I always went there, and I enjoyed all of that. But going back to DeLand and going downtown, and I remember when they paved the boulevard, it was all brick too. It wasn't anything fancy till they put a cement road in. New York Avenue they put in, it was in the 40s. It started getting some cracks and bumps in it. Both of them are. But they did something a few years ago that I didn't quite understand, that they made the fancy crossings with the brick pavers in the road out here. That was fine, but some of those things are very rough today. It wasn't done and near as nice as what they tore up to put it in. But that was politics, and they thought that should be done. Well, I think the people would have come anyway. But the Main Street people have turned it around to where they brought the people here.
It's a very positive thing now.
What
yes.
the street is made out of and all this and that, I don't think really would. But they don't care about that. They're coming to see DeLand and the things that have been done, and it's very, very important to me to see it. But it's amazing to see all the restaurants in downtown DeLand, and you people that are watching this and are going to interview this sometime, you can go up here to Plymouth Avenue and head to DeLeon Springs, and there are 30 restaurants just going north between DeLand and DeLeon Springs today. And just think what there is down. That's not counting downtown. This is north of Plymouth. Come downtown and count them again, and then go south. So the restaurant business is turned into big business in DeLand. I mean, it absolutely is, and it's bringing people here. And the most other two important things that have happened in my life that I'm 90 years old now. Some part of it was not good. My last 10 years, my wife Mary had dementia and Alzheimer's, and her last 5 years she spent at the Good Shepherd West on West New York Avenue, and that was probably the most memorable thing for me. I went up to see her every day, twice a day. I ate there quite often with them. I got to be I was nearly a resident there, but not quite, but it was a very wonderful facility that took care of her so well. I couldn't have done any better. And my daughters and I were so pleased at where she spent her last days. But during those last days, I met another lady, and this was at church, like I'm going today at 11 o'clock. No, 12 o'clock, excuse me. But she was there, and she was working on the altar guild, and I asked this lady after this church service was over, I said, would you like to go out to lunch with me? I'm hungry. I'm going to go get something to eat. I've never seen her before in my life, and here I am talking with someone that she's never seen me before. So here we go, and she said, yes, I'll go with you. So I said, okay, my car's right out here in the front. She says, no, I'll bring my own car. I'll meet you there. So she didn't know me. She wasn't going to get in the car with me. So we went to the Clarion Hotel and had a buffet, which was pretty good. We were late getting there. It was after 1 o'clock. And that hotel now has turned into assisted living also. But going back to this lady, and her name is Hilda McCarter. I went with her for 3 years, off and on, while Mary was in assisted living. I had lost Mary 5 years ago. In other words, I was coming home to an empty house every night. I didn't have anybody, and I missed her. And Hilda, her personality and mine go right together. She is not a DeLand native, and the story about her, I have to tell you that story. It's one of the most exciting things that you people will never hear again. Hilda is from Atlanta, Georgia. Well, and she's got that little bit of that drawl with her, and she still speaks Georgia, and she still recognizes Georgia as her home. Well, I made up this little story that was so nice that I was telling all my friends, and everybody would say, I like to always tell this because I said, Hilda was there in Atlanta. She was standing there on the veranda at Terra with Scarlett, and she was there, and they were watching Sherman come marching through Atlanta. And that's the most amazing story because she is still here with us today.
You're funny.
And I think that
you are funny.
that this lady is helping me. She's a narrator, helping me do this. But since all that has happened, we were married in January 9th this year in the St. Barnabas Church. We had 50 members, family members only. We could not have all our friends. It would have been too much for us to handle, and we're older people, but we realized after all this started and everything all happened, we're starting over again. I don't feel like I'm 90 years old. She doesn't feel like she's her age either. And she is selling her house and moving up to my house with me, and we're in the process of doing that right now. So we took time off from doing that to be here today and to visit with you people. And Hilda has a album here that was made. We had made from the pictures with the pictures and all of that, and it tells about our wedding. It probably, you talk about the best years of your life, this is it for me, because I saw everything happen before this, but what's happening now is the future, and the future is what we're going to have together, and I think that that is the most remarkable thing that could ever happen to me, and I enjoy every bit of it, and we are so pleased to be here to help you, and I hope I can come back again and tell you some more stories about DeLand, because we just broke the ice on it. But I want to tell you one other thing. I'm a very good friend of Bill Drigger's. He and I went to school together, so he and I saw all these things together, and it's all been very enjoyable. And thank you very much.